Welcome back, President Jay Burcham, for another edition of Brentwood Christian Podcast. So excited that you're here today.
Glad to be here. Always
Awesome.
glad.
Today is just, the end of a crazy week, but it was a great week because just the other night, my wife and I, Rhonda, were joined by our Director of Communications, Ethan Grant, with his wife, Tristan, and we went to the Austin Best of Awards, which is held every year in September. It was a fancy shindig, actually, in downtown Austin at the Marriott. And we went there, had a nice dinner, and there was just, like you said, a gajillion companies that were being recognized. The final three businesses would be listed, and then they would read out who won for the best of for the year. And so Brentwood Christian School, I'm happy to announce, we won Best of Private School for Central Texas, and we also won Best of Preschool for the year.
Yeah, I was able to attend that a couple of years back, the big gala, and it's a lot of fun, and it's companies from all over. You're sitting next to Jack Allen or someone like that, and one of the great things about this is the community gets involved. That's how you win these things, your community supporting you. They look at the merits of the school and all, but a big part of it is our communities. And I think you told me the other finalists were, I believe, St. Michael's, St. Andrews. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Which are big schools, good schools, very big schools. But just for our new families, this is 5 years running that Brentwood Christian's been named the best private school in Central Texas, and 3 of 5 years the best preschool in Central Texas. So a lot to be proud of there. And that's a big deal. When families come into Central Texas, move here, one of the places they look to determine what's out there is they go to the newspaper still. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't own, not many people own and pick up and spread a newspaper. Used to, one of the happy things in life was opening up the sports page, and I don't even get the newspaper anymore. It's on your phone.
I did the comics.
Yeah. Well, those Sunday comics after church was a rite of passage growing up. But I used to love the Saturday morning sports page. That was my favorite time of reading. But that's what it is. The Austin American Statesman, the paper, they look at what are the best businesses. And thank you all for representing the school, you and Ethan and your wives. And it's just a really neat thing to see. That's not a small thing. Think of the number of private schools in Austin, and not only Austin, but Central Texas. So year over year over year over year over year over year, I think I counted 5 there, I'm not sure, we've been named the best school.
I know, and we proudly display the certificate that they send to us because it does say a lot, mm-hmm. as well as we won Austin Families People's Choice Award this year as well, and that's 5 years in a row.
Yeah.
So I guess we got it going on here at Brentwood. 9-time state academic champion. Numerous TAPS awards. Fine arts. Our Bellas won, state champion
Bellas
last year?
Won state the last couple of years. Bands won state the last couple of years. Our volleyball's been right there in the championship the last couple of years. I hate to we'll leave somebody out. But the bottom line is it's the kids, the teachers. They do such a good job preparing our kids, and I know that's part of our topic today, preparing our kids, and then our community recognizes that and appreciates it. When you have awards like the Austin Statesman Award, and then Austin Family Magazine, I know, has named us the best private school, I think 5 years running as well. Those are great. And then you have the awards like Niche, where they recognize the highest quality, and Niche is one that is more set on the achievements and merit of the school, and we're rated as an A+ school in that, and that's hard to do, very hard to do. And that looks at everything from offerings to where our kids end up going to college, to our stick rates there, all of these efficiencies and proficiencies that determine your academic metrics. And when you approach me about today's subject, which if you don't mind, I'll just spill the beans on it, is in a college preparatory school, one that is really designed to move our kids efficiently and proficiently, again, towards matriculation that puts them going to school of choice. Because it's one thing to say we've got 100% success rate into college acceptance. Well, where? Mm-hmm. Are your kids getting into first choice, second choice, third, or their fallback school? And so looking at that, and then in that preparation, how are we preparing them academically? That's obviously, we're a school. That's huge. Socially, because they have to leave home, be independent and ready to go. And even though that is the parents' job, well, we are partners in that. Their kids are here, 8, and if they're in extracurriculars, some 12 hours a day. This is where they learn that. Then they learn the grit of that. So you have academic, behavioral, social, and then the other leg of the stool. And the reason why so many of our public school kids, and God bless public school, we are there to support them, but it's the reason so many kids struggle is they leave that, they're on a 3-legged stool, behavior, social, academic. We're on a 4-legged stool. Our other is spiritual, and the preparation of spiritual. And a lot of our new families will say, well, how does spirituality help in academics? How does having a focus on spirituality make my kid more apt to do their homework, to do it efficiently, to understand what is going on and being able to synthesize that back, not just the regurgitation of information, but the synthesis of that information to develop critical thought? How does spirituality play a role in that? And that's really what we wanted to talk about is Christian worldview. It's not just a slogan. It is a teaching. It's a pedagogical methodology. And that means the pedagogy, the focus on the academics, the methodology, the method by which we do it. Part of our pedagogical methodology is from a biblical worldview.
Definitely. And that's even mentioned in all of our ROIs, which we talked about last time, because in the Christian worldview, I mean, it's one thing to be Christian in name, but if you're just Christian in name only, you got a problem. What does that mean? Biblical integration is so much, and then putting we pray before class starts, or that we put a Bible verse on our homework. That is not biblical worldview. That is not biblical integration. It's knowing who the author is of science, who is the author of history, who is the author of language. Well, you go down the list. Everything that's related to academics stems from our Creator. That's how we learn to know more about Him, is through His creation.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes when people hear something like Christian worldview, they when they're outside of this realm, they think, well, that means you say a prayer, as you said at the start of class, or ram a scripture. That's not what it is. In fact, oftentimes it's not even pulling scripture into it, even though it's a biblical worldview. It is the emanation or the starting point of knowledge is God. Ultimately, the ending point of knowledge is God. Everything points back to either beginning with or exiting and ending with God. And you say, well, what does God have to do with American history? Well, what was this country founded on? There are so many things that you have to step back and look, and also say, from a biblical worldview or Christian worldview, how do I take this synthesized knowledge? Because there will be those that say, okay, well, physics, what does this formula have to do with God, and how are you not watering it down? The bottom line on it is the knowledge that we ascertain. How are we going to use our ultimate knowledge base, not just this one little piece, but everything we foment into who we become? How do we use that for the betterment of man, the betterment of our community? And in doing that, we become what is our mission, teaching our kids to lead by service. So that service leadership mentality says we're going to take what we learn and who we become and use that as a mechanism and means to be better. And so when you talk about how can Christian worldview in the classroom, because parents will sometimes ask this, does that water down the focus on the hard core academics? If I am learning, formulas for geometry, if I'm learning, something that's very specific to an analytical process, won't peeling time away and talking about Jesus water that down? Well, one of the things I want you to hear is you don't peel time away and talk. Right. You still learn those analytical processes, but you learn why you're learning them. What are you going to do with them? How is that going to impact and affect you, and how are you going to use that to impact and affect others? And so that's one of the things that I think is a bit of a misnomer. We don't take everything out there and figure out where in the Bible it fits.
Right.
What we do is we take and we figure out how the people we are becoming fit into this world, therefore worldview. We do it from a biblical standpoint. We are going in as servant leaders in this world, and how do we take the knowledge that we are gaining to do that? And one of the things I want parents to understand, it hasn't been that long ago, but say mid-90s, Your grades and test scores was how you got into college, period. Your SATs, some would take the ACTs, and then your grades. That was it. That was 100%. That's maybe 50% now. The grades, yes, they are important. Test scores, not as important as they used to be, but they are important. What matters are the people that these kids are. You see, for colleges, and listen, we can have a discussion later. Let's talk ROIs on colleges, because I have some real thoughts on that. But if you're going to college, that is an investment of you and your children into, from a time and money perspective, of where they end up going. But it's also an investment by that college, because if they accept the wrong kid and they wash out, then that is a cost. It's an opportunity cost for that college. They have to replace now a position that is not a matriculated position. And so colleges are looking for kids that will stick. They're also looking for kids that will have original thought, because that's where research comes from. That's where opportunity. In other words, it is a co-investment. There's a symbiosis there in investment. And from that, when we have kids matriculating on into college, they have to be prepared to stick into that community. And the reason why colleges are looking for kids from schools like this is that, yes, they have good grades, they have good test scores, but they're also community engaged. They're community engaged in service. They're a community engaged in extracurricular activities. They're in the play. They're on the team. They do the things that when they go off to college and all of a sudden they're in class 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, and then have a lot of free time. What are they going to do with that free time? Are they going to get engaged in the community and find things that cause them to stick into that community, be a productive member of that community, and therefore have an opportunity to be productive on behalf of the college itself? And that's a different way of thinking than when you and I went to college. When we went, it was great. You're here to get a diploma. It's grades, bottom line. Now, I went on a athletic scholarship. That's how I got to go to college. But even in that, all the college cared about was, are you good on the football field and are you making your grades?
Right.
Period. That's it. Now then, that's why the interview, the paper you write, the personal essay, those things that tell the type of person, they want to know, what are you involved in? You see, when you talk about biblical worldview, what it does is it says there is a world outside of you. There is a world outside of your child and this thing. There is a world where they are involved and engaged, and in that involvement and engagement, they're looking beyond themselves to be the beneficiaries. And when colleges see that from a college preparatory standpoint, that's why our kids are so far above identifying college of choice, sticking longer, because we watch the stick rates, going through and getting a degree in a timely fashion. In other words, they've done the work here to identify what the things are they're interested in. They're more apt to go into field of choice earlier, thereby they're not wasting years' times changing degrees. So there's all these things, families, you need to be thinking about. It's like, yes, it's important to get your kid into the right college. It's important to get them to the right one at the right time. They do the right thing. They graduate in the right amount of time, and they exit with what they need to set themselves up for life. And in the interim, they were productive members of that community with that college. That's what a biblical worldview affords, because what it does is it places the kid's mind in, how do I engage into this community to make it better? Mm-hmm. How am I a representative of Christ, not at the BCS campus because they've matriculated on, but at my college campus? One of the things that our kids learn exiting, and this is part of biblical worldview, Mr. Harper, Mr. Witcher, they will talk with our kids on the way out and get a plan. Okay, you're going to, where'd you go to college?
Well, Cal Baptist.
Okay, Cal Baptist. And what city was that in?
Riverside, California.
So one of your homework assignments is, we want you to find all the churches near Cal Baptist, go read on website, find the 5 that look like the ones you want to visit first. Where are they? What time does service start? And literally write out a plan that says, here's when I go off to college. Mom and Dad aren't there the first time. I might not know a lot of people. Here's what time I've got to get up on that Sunday to be. Here's what time class is, what time church is. Here's the reason why I find this church interesting. In other words, when we go out to eat, we don't just drive down the road and the first sign that says restaurant, we pull in and start eating what they have. We look up and say, what kind of food is it? We look up how many stars it has rated next to it. What's the rating? We look up their service, their atmosphere, and their environment. If we're going to do that with our tacos tonight for dinner, why in the world would we not do that for our souls? And so that's just the type of lessons that our kids will learn. And so when our kids go off to college, that first Sunday, what they're going to do is they already have a plan of where they're going to go. And then they're going to go to a new community that oftentimes those are one of the most welcoming communities. And they find that college group. They find the people that invite them over and feed them dinner. And there's another community they're a part of at Stick Rate. When you talk biblical worldview, it's beyond reading, writing, arithmetic, but what it does is it gives purpose to reading, writing, arithmetic. It gives an avenue for not only the exploration of, but the implementation of the gifts you learn through reading, writing, arithmetic, and it makes it purposeful.
And along with that, of course, along the way, what we do here and engaging in, civil discourse and debate and learning through chapel, learning through Bible studies is helping these kids that, yes, the bigger picture of the biblical worldview, being productive members of society, but also that inward reflection and the self-examination that what do I believe? I remember years ago when I was at a high school, I would see, the kids, it was a Christian school. We had hundreds of, I think 600 high school students. They would sleep during chapel. And my first year there, and I would talk and get to know some of the students and say, so how's it going? What are you guys doing? I noticed you guys are sleeping through chapel. Yeah, it's boring. It's this or that. Okay, well, why are you here? Well, because my parents want me to go here. Okay. So you talk with the parents. Yeah, I just dropped my kid off. It's your job to make them good Christian, young men and women. And as I got to understand more working with these kids, I learned that they didn't own their own faith, that they were relying on their parents' faith, or they were just regurgitating what they were told to believe. And so that when they left high school, they weren't looking for those churches. They weren't looking for opportunities to get plugged in that environment, and it kind of went by the wayside. And so that was a big concern for me. And one of the draws that took me here to Brentwood was to really, see exactly what do they mean by Christian worldview? How are we making an impact in these kids so that they're looking at the inner parts of them and what do I believe? Can I defend what I believe when I go on those college campuses? Can I be the person that with the culture, which I think churches have failed in large part as a whole, in that if we look at our society and look at our culture, we don't know how to debate. We don't know how to engage in the culture and have those conversations to where we have a civil conversation. It doesn't have to end up to where, like you said before, if we stop talking, then problems happen. We have to continue, but we got to teach our kids how to debate in a respectful way, in a loving way, because we might be the only Bible some people read by looking at our lives. So they should be looking at us on the outside saying, there's something about you that I want. Tell me more about that. And those are those opportunities that I think that we help instill here for these kids as they go out, even after high school.
Yeah, and one of the things you said in the very beginning of what you just said is
my rant
of your screed. There is a really important thing you did say. It was that discord part up front. One of the true lessons of a good education, and parents hear this, is that the identification and retrieval of information is not education. That is not what it's about. It's not about learning these dates on a history assignment.
It's like memorizing a song.
Yeah, and then letting it go. And in fact, I often say if I had one of these things, I could have written 3 dissertations, going through the card catalog and sending off for journals and maybe finding them. Finding the backing bibliography was the hardest part of writing a paper. Well, you can do it in about 3 minutes with this thing. But what is being lost because of these things is original thought and critical thinking. And one of the things with biblical worldview, for example, and what you're talking about, we challenge our kids from a critical thinking standpoint is you don't believe something because we told you to believe it. That's not education. I don't care if it is a teacher saying, I'm telling you 1 + 1 is 2. We want you to go through the process of writing 1 + 1 and figuring that out for yourself. Because critical thinking, it was Martin Luther King that said it, the character plus education is true education, critical thinking. The ability to look at something and determine for yourself and then question. It's even from that faith perspective. Biblical worldview is not teaching blind obedience to faith. Mm-hmm. In fact, that's truly dichotomous to the biblical worldview. The biblical worldview says that God is big enough and strong enough to allow us to question our relationship with Him and who He even is. If someone says they have never in their life questioned, is God real? That means they've not really looked for God.
Right.
You can't do that. And I don't think anyone being truly honest would say, I have never had a doubt. Doubt is natural. Mm-hmm. My goodness, Jesus Christ, the night before He died, had doubts about the plan that they had agreed upon and put into place, asking God to let this pass from Him. That was a doubt. Was that sin? It was absolutely not a sin. And with our kids, one of the things we do is we teach them the freedom to think for themselves, and we do it in a way of saying, ask questions. Don't ask questions of, what was that date again? You ask questions so that you think critically about the information we're retrieving. Again, the regurgitation of facts is not an education. Education is learning what to do with the things that you have learned and how you use that to better yourselves and others. And so in that discord, in that being an example for other people, in those relationships, the way that biblical worldview plays into that is it always says that someone else needs to be the focus of that betterment. And if so, you will become better in that process. Mm-hmm. Biblical worldview says that if we are praising God and giving Him the glory rather than us trying to attain it for ourselves, and if the end result of what we are doing is for the betterment of someone else so that we can bring an example of Christ to them, we will bring others to us that will lift them up, and by lifting them up, we have lifted ourselves up spiritually, and then by asking the questions, we have the knowledge base in order to do what we need to do within that circumstance. And one of the things I love what I've heard you say it many times that, and there'll be some parents that might react a little bit harshly to that and say, well, I want my faith to be my kid's faith. Wonderful. The way that you can have your faith, your kids' faith, is help them make it theirs.
Exactly.
Help them learn. And you don't do that by getting the car, it's time to go to church. Mm-hmm. It's get them engaged in the Scripture and make sure they understand what you believe and why. Have those talks with them, parents. Talk with your kids about your belief. Talk about your doubts. Talk about where your faith has been shaken and then has become stronger. Help them learn through you, but it still needs to be their faith. And just like in education, it will do your child no good for them to have an A in Mr. Harper's classroom because they've memorized all the answer to Mr. Harper's test. Right. But if what they will do is learn what Mr. Harper is proffering them, and he's a great teacher, learn what he is proffering them, they will be better for it. And I promise you, they will not be great in Mr. Harper's class unless they make it their own education they're leaving from, because it's going to challenge them on it. And that's really what we're talking about is oftentimes in an academic setting, the retrieval of information and the ability to put it in the right place will get a good grade on a test, good enough, we move on. What we want to see is the application of that and how you're using it as a person. We want to see how you're serving. So that's like, why do we have a spiritual emphasis day where we go and work the soup kitchen or we go clean someone's yard? Why do we take a group out after the floods and clean? Why do we? Because if we are not taking what the blessings we have bestowed upon us here, extending and extolling that to the community, and learning in that process where our place is in the community, how we are blessed beyond some, therefore we have a duty to, how we still have blessings we can't attain, and how we can make people. That is where you begin creating your own understanding of faith, your own place in the faith story, your relationship with God. And that happens when you have, again, start at the base, classrooms that are focused on that biblical worldview. There is a starting point for knowledge, and there is a purpose of knowledge. There is a betterment to be had, and the beneficiary is not just you. It is not just your truth. In fact, it's not your truth. Jesus is the truth. He is the way and He is the life. If we can give that over and we don't selfishly look at it, all of a sudden we're not learning these things just for ourselves, which is just to get through this next test. We're learning it for the betterment of. And in that betterment of, the recipient is someone beyond us. And when so, we become better students because now we are better people, and we do have a faith. We do have a depth to us. And when we do that, we are more attractive to colleges. When we go to college, we have a better opportunity to succeed. We're also more attractive to other people because you're a better person and easier to be around. It is amazing how when you make yourself Christ-like, people are drawn to you.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what biblical worldview is.
It does. It's well said, because it is an attraction. I've seen that. I've lived it. I've seen it in other students. And I can tell you that even when I was in college, boy, I'll tell you, it seems like every course that I took before I ended up at Cal Baptist, I was at Cal State Fullerton. It seems like every teacher I had was attacking the Christian faith and attacking me. And I was the guy that was always raising the hand, and we'd get into these dialogues. And if I didn't have an answer, I was going to do research, and I went back. In fact, at one point I told my wife, I said, hey, Rhonda, I said, if I could do a full-time job, I would just take classes at college campuses and be that guy that's just raising the hand in the class when the teacher starts attacking the Christian faith. Because I was drawn to that. I didn't go to Cal State Fullerton for any other reason except to have a good secular college education, because I was raised in a Christian environment. And so in doing that, it challenged me to be able to see what the world believes. I love creation evolution. That was just my thing. And I went to every seminar. I went to every debate. I went to every conference, and I read everything on the other side, to the point where I am now at a point in my life where I have no questions or doubts of what I believe, as far as that there is a creator. He did create the whole universe, and I have no problem with that. And so that has strengthened my faith and my relationship with the Lord as I've come to grow closer to Him through creation. And you talked about mathematics, you're talking about physics. Well, our planet doesn't just, rotate in the universe in that elliptical orbit at its tilt in the axis by accident. It's not like, well, it looks pretty out there. No, there is science behind it. There's mathematics behind it. There is an order behind it. And the God that created all that in that order, who ex nihilo created out of nothing everything. And I think when students start learning from even a deeper standpoint of understanding there is a creator, He created all these things, that it makes you richer of a person to want to know more, to learn more. Not like what you were saying earlier, just checking the boxes, basically, just so I can get by and move on to the next. There is something to be said about really getting the most out of every experience that we have. It will make us more well-rounded. It'll give us a better perspective. It'll teach us to appreciate other people's perspective that might even be different than ours. And it teaches us a temperance that we can tolerate different views. And so we can have and engage in those discussions. And if we don't have the answers, we go seek somebody that does have the answer, instead of, well, that's what I heard. That's what I heard. How many times did I hear that? Well, somebody would spout out something and they'd say, okay, can you back that up with facts? Well, no, but that's what I heard. Well, how silly is that? If you're going to speak on something passionate, do you know the answers behind that? If not, do the work. And we want to teach our students to do that so they are more knowledgeable, so that they can always be ready to give an answer for the hope that lies within them.
Yeah, and I know we need to wrap up, but I just want to make one last point, because it sounds almost antithetical to what you would think, is that when your grades aren't the most important thing, oftentimes your grades will improve. When being the most popular kid is not the most important thing, oftentimes it's when you find people drawn to you. When there is something greater than you, and the point of that greatness is serving our all-powerful God. Supplicating to Him in humbleness that we need Him, understanding that we have a Savior that walked this earth and understands what we are going through, and we can bring to Him the problems we have in this world, that He has aligned us in a place like this where there are people who care and will help through those. And then when we can make those things our priority, it's amazing how grades will come. Mm-hmm. You know, I've told so many parents, and I don't think some believe it when I say it, is that this is a school. Grades matter, but they are not the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Our God is the single most important thing we will talk about while your kids are here. And I hope, parents, you believe us when I say this, that's what you want. Because there's nothing more important. And, you know, you're talking about, you say, well, what about my child's grades? That affects their livelihood. We're talking about their salvation. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more important than that. And then second to that is the family. You know, that yes, grades are important, but they're not near as important as the relationship with God. They're not near as important as the relationship in your family. After that is their fellow man. After that, then we're talking about themselves, and that's the grades. But I'll tell you what, if you put God first, and it's done in a family that cares and puts God first, and done in a way that socially you are adapting, and adopting the servant mentality. Think about what we talked about earlier. Social, behavioral, academic, those are the three legs of the stool typically. Now add that fourth one in, that spiritual. If that's the true foundation, these others will put you in a place. Grades will come. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing, because you'll learn to work, because you work to the glory of God. You do it in a way that's respectful, therefore you have a relationship with your teacher. You invest in them, they invest in you. It's purposeful, because you're doing it in a way that will exemplify a family being proud because you're glorifying God. It's amazing when you don't make God this thing you do over here on the weekend. Instead, you make it everything that you do. It is your worldview. It is your worldview. Parents, a biblical worldview is not a pedagogical methodology alone for a school. That ought to be the family's worldview. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, the grades will come. And the friendships will come. The girlfriend and boyfriend, that will happen. You know, all these things. Will life be great? Am I talking prosperity? Absolutely not. But if your priorities are in place, then when life becomes difficult, you know how to get through it.
That's right. That peace that surpasses all understanding. So, well, that's enough time for today, unfortunately. But next week, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about what we've been doing with the men's Bible study. It's been really exciting and great conversation. And we'd love more of the dads to come out and join us every other Friday at 7 o'clock at the church parlor. So breakfast is provided, and we even offer extended care for those who have children to be able to be dropped off. And for those attending, it's no charge. So we really want to encourage the dads to come out. We had some new faces today, so that was really exciting.
It's a great way to start a weekend.
Definitely. So, Jay, thank you. And I know you always like to sign us off with your famous...
It's a great day to be at Brentwood Bear.
Well, even though I am a sinner, he will always be my friend. He starts in the middle, and he does not have an end. And when my soul was held for ransom,